Well, hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. How about Dr. Fauci yesterday? This guy does not give up. He is unrelenting in his support of the vaccinations, support of the lockdowns, refuses to admit the mistakes, even though along the way they get him to make some admissions, like there's no science behind the 6-foot distancing. There's no science behind the masking of children. But yet Democrats praise this guy as a hero. And to me, all I heard were what amounts to be lies, in my opinion. So I thought today, what a podcast I have for you. I would bring my friend on, Dr. Peter McCullough with the Wellness Companies, one of the premier, if not the premier expert on COVID and the government response to that pandemic. And we'd go through some of Dr. Fauci's comments. Of course, the podcast is brought to you by the Wellness Company, twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. I urge you to get their medical emergency kits. What you're about to see is proof of why you need these kits, by the way. But with that, let's get started with the program.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, thank you very much, folks. As promised, Dr. Peter McCullough is with us. Doc, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
All right, your reaction before we get into some of these clips, and I cut a whole bunch of them, your reaction to Dr. Fauci yesterday as a bird's eye view of this.
Yeah, I wrote on my Substack this morning, having watched it and commented on Fox News last night on Laura Ingram's program with the subcommittee chair, Brad Wenstrup, Republican congressman, that Fauci was deceptive, he was deflective, and he was imperious. He really didn't care about the authority of the committee or, the impressions that the American people had on pandemic response.
I feel like it's almost an arrogance that I see in him and his refusal to admit. Do you think he knows that they were so wrong on so much of this, or is he just delusional to all of it?
I think he's arrogant and delusional. And just like when he testified in closed door session in January of 2024, I testified 2 days after him, same people, I talked to them, the committee members, they said Fauci, again, did not cite any evidence. He just got up there and tried to snow the committee, basically.
Yeah. Very different to how you approach things. And I always tell you, I'm always amazed at how you always use the studies, the evidence, you cite it. And if you don't know, you'll just say, we don't know the studies instead of making it up as you go, which is what Dr. Fauci does. You were on Laura Ingraham with Brad Wenstrup, who was the chairman of this subcommittee that was holding the hearing yesterday. This is some questioning between him and Dr. Fauci. Let me play it for you and then get your response. I thought we could go through some of these. Hear Dr. Fauci and then get the truth from Dr. Peter McCullough. That's what I like to do. All right, let's roll it.
Lives, and I want to thank you for your support and engagement on that. However, despite statements to the contrary, it did not stop transmission of the virus. Did the COVID vaccine stop transmission of the virus?
That is a complicated issue because in the beginning, the first iteration of the vaccines did have an effect. Not 100%, not a high effect. They did prevent infection and subsequently, obviously, transmission. However, it's important to point out something that we did not know early on that became evident as the months went by is that the durability of protection against infection and hence transmission was relatively limited, whereas the duration of protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and deaths was more prolonged. We did not know that in the beginning. In the beginning, it was felt that, in fact, it did prevent infection and thus transmission. But that was proven as time went by to not be a durable effect.
So, Dr. McCullough, for a long time, he seemed to be pushing that this stops the transmission. What do you make of his comments there and specifically the timeline of all of this?
Well, first off, let's just comment on his appearance, Grant. He appears older and withered. Yeah, you can tell. It's not the same fresh Anthony Fauci we saw a few years ago. He looks worn down by this. Now, he links prevention of infection with transmission. Again, that's a very skilled answer. You can tell he's been coached on this. He said, well, it reduced infection and therefore it reduced transmission. So the idea, if you blocked an infection in one person, then theoretically it wouldn't spread to the next one. He's not addressing the question. The question is, when someone has the virus and they've taken the vaccine, can they pass it to somebody else who's taken the vaccine? And the answer is yes. Our CDC director came out there and said they don't block transmission. European Parliament member Rob Roos from the Netherlands questioned the Pfizer executive. And she said, no, we never tested them for transmission. So so again, he's allowing Wenstrup. Now, Wenstrup's a doctor of podiatric medicine, a foot doctor. He's not one, if I was asking the questions, I would stop him right there and say, listen, I didn't ask you about prevention of COVID with you. I'm asking you directly about transmission. I would have given the example of someone who's vaccinated who has the virus and somebody vaccinated who doesn't. Can they pass it? The answer is yes.
Well, Wenstrup actually said something very interesting in the beginning. It almost got cut off, but I want you to hear this real quick.
The vaccine saved millions of lives, and I want to thank you for your support and engagement on that.
Did it? Did the vaccine save millions of lives?
Wenstrup is making that up. It's a fake claim. There's been no study, randomized trial, that ever showed the vaccines reduced death. None. There's not a single valid study. Dennis Rancourt last year in mid-2023 estimated worldwide the vaccine caused 17 million deaths. And now a paper out today in British Medical Journal, Grant, by Mostert and colleagues, figures in 47 countries, mainly U.S. and the Western countries, about 3 million deaths just in 2021, 2022 alone, vaccine deaths. So no, the vaccines did not save lives. They cost lives.
All right. We've been doing this podcast for 7 minutes, and you've named 2 more studies than Dr. Fauci named in however many hours he was under oath yesterday. That should tell you most of the story you need to hear. Speaking of doctors, Dr. McCormick, who I know, he's come on my Real America's Voice show before. He was basically canceled, like so many of us, Dr. McCullough, for trying to speak out on alternative treatments. He confronted Dr. Fauci on that. I want you to listen to this interaction between McCormick and Fauci and then get your response here.
Why would I be criticized by a bureaucrat for doing my very best as a healthcare? This is a rhetorical question. But why? Why would the government, who's never treated a patient for COVID, you can read all the things you want, but you're not there. You're not seeing patients. You're not watching people die, intubating patients right there with that disease in your face, watching it happen, watching the development of this disease and actually learning from it. But I'm being told by bureaucrats what's right and wrong. And what's funny is everything I was censored on, I was proven to be right. Pretty crazy, isn't it?
All right, before we get back to more of it, that is true, from ivermectin to transmission to we shouldn't be intubating patients. Everything we were called conspiracy theorists on when I was, look, I'll admit, as much as some of the left-wing commentators were regurgitating the talking points of Fauci, I was regurgitating the points of Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Thorpe and others. But I was really doing my research and going with people I trust, but I was regurgitating these same talking points coming from the experts that I believe to be experts. It all turned out to be true, these so-called conspiracy theories.
There's always multiple points of view, but in the end, the truth emerges. So early on, we didn't know if intubating patients was a good thing or not. My judgment said, no, this is not good. They'll get ventilator-associated pneumonias. We were right. No one today says, I wish we would have intubated more people, right? No one says that today. So what we're seeing, and by the way, that was a very animated, expository set of statements that he made. But you can tell the passion. He was a doctor censored. Roger Marshall, who's on the Senate, who I know personally, Roger was censored for trying to treat people. Clearly, I was in the entire early treatment movement. Fauci sat there and just listened to this and the public knows that Fauci was a driver of therapeutic nihilism. That means to actually deny people treatment and let them die.
It's amazing. I'm not a doctor, but I was kicked off YouTube for saying much of the same things you and Dr. McCormick were doing for your patients. And I was kicked off YouTube for it. And now it comes out that everything that was said there on YouTube was true. I mean, it's just such a disgrace. I'll continue, Dr. McCormick, here.
You said in an interview that you gave as part of an audiobook written by Michael Spector that you believed an institutional should make it hard for people to live their lives so they'd feel pressured to get vaccinated. Could we run the audio clip on that, please?
You think can be done about it. I have to say that I don't see a big solution other than some sort of mandatory vaccination. I know federal officials don't like to use that term.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have schools, universities, and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Lady, you're going to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us, you get vaccinated. And it's been proven that when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological bullshit and they get vaccinated.
Thank you. Are all objections to COVID vaccinations ideological bullshit, Dr. Fauci?
No, they're not, and
Thank
that's
you.
not what I was referring to.
Well, in reference to making it hard for people to get education, traveling, working, I'd say it very much was in context. And I take great offense to this. Miss Allison Williams testified.
So, Dr. McCullough, when I hear him say, hey, lady, hey, guy, you're going to get vaccinated, how dare he? He's a government bureaucrat. He has no business putting a demand like that on someone. And he talks with, again, we'll use the term arrogant because I don't know what else to use here. Are you as offended as I am when you hear that tape of Dr. Fauci being played in the halls of Congress?
Yeah, what he said is once schools and employers are legally protected, that they will feel empowered to do this, to actually make people's lives miserable in order to force them to get vaccinated. And the way Fauci said it in that clip was someone who was wielding power, Grant. He was wielding power over the nation. You do get a sense here that this is a power trip.
Did you ever think, now that we're so far through this and you are in the position where you are, Dr. McCullough, that the people at CDC and NIH literally had attitudes like this when we were dealing with medical emergencies that were affecting so many people?
They did. They had attitudes like this. They thought they could basically cast down their views on the world, and didn't matter what we thought, didn't matter the consequences. McCormick points out people lost their jobs, their educational careers were ruined, people were fired, they were demonetized, all because Fauci and this small group of people wanted to actually have power over the world through mass vaccination.
Let me play that clip of McCormick because he goes on, he tells a story, and I think it's great to hear these stories over and over and over again so we don't make the same mistakes or we don't let government do what they did to us again, which is really, I think it's going to be on all of us, quite frankly.
Before this committee about losing her job because she sought an exemption for ESPN's vaccine mandate, which came from recommendations from bureaucrats like yourself. She and her husband were actively working with a fertility expert, a physician, on how to get pregnant, and agreed with the premise that she was young, healthy, wanted to get pregnant, and shouldn't get the vaccination for medical purposes. But she was fired because you made it hard, just like you said in your statement, because you didn't want to make sure that the ideological bullshit got in the way of her working, of living her life, of making a medical decision with her healthcare professional. I think America should take great offense to this. That's exactly what you meant when you said making it hard for people to live without getting a vaccination. You affected people's ability to work, travel, be educated, to actually flourish in American society, to self-determine, as we're all given God-given rights. Shame on you.
Dr. McCullough, was that woman right to be concerned about getting the vaccine when she was pregnant? She got fired over this. Did she have a right to be concerned?
She was right. She maybe didn't have the data at the time, but we learned that the vaccines distribute to the ovaries where they cause damage. Over 70% of women get their menstrual periods disrupted by the vaccine. The menstrual period is a very delicately timed cycle of release, ovulation, fertilization, implantation, and then growth. That's clearly going to be impaired if the vaccines impair the menstrual cycle. No doubt about it. Now we've learned that the vaccines almost certainly integrate into the human genome. That was shown by Alden and colleagues. That means at least a piece, or if not the whole code of Pfizer or Moderna, gets into DNA. Then she's going to pass that on to her child. So she has the right to have a baby. She has a right to go through pregnancy planning, fertility treatment if needed. And she also has a right to keep her job because the vaccines didn't reduce transmission, and they, for her, would not reduce the risks of any serious outcome. So she was actually stripped of her rights because of Fauci and the vaccine. And boy, I tell you, McCormick is going at it hard. You can tell he is passionate about what happened to Americans being stripped of their civil liberties.
You know, I want to play. I got other clips here. I got one. They go after so-called podcasters. I wonder who they're talking about here, me and so many others. But I want to ask you really quickly, because I think this is important. I know that with all due respect to medical doctors, but so many doctors think they're right. There's no other opinion. You're a patient. You come in, listen to me. If you don't listen to me, they're angry with you. I actually believe in using your intuition. I'm still a firm believer. Nobody knows my body like I know my body. And I take in information. I take a doctor I trust. He gives me information. But ultimately, just like with a lawyer, they can give me information, but ultimately I'm the decider for my own body. Is that a wrong attitude to have?
No, that's correct. Remember, doctors give opinions, and there's always multiple opinions. You ask people, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. You're seeking opinions, just like legal opinions. Nobody serves each other judicial notice. Nobody has the full set of facts, Grant. And I think you're right. You know, people know their bodies. The good doctors always listen, spend a lot of time listening, because that's where the answers will come from.
All right, interesting. Hey, I want to tell people about speaking of listening and getting answers. The wellness company really listened to the public out there and came up with a company that I think is doing just such amazing things, and I'm so grateful to be associated with it. But specifically, folks, I want to tell you about these emergency medical kits with the prescription antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitics, like ivermectin, that can help you survive an emergency, especially, God forbid, there's a national disaster. I'm in Texas. We just had power out for like 48 hours. God forbid that happens, the drugstores close down and you have a medical emergency and you need some of the common prescription medications that can save a life, that can save a family member's life. You need to have this stuff on hand in your house. So here's what I want you to do. Go to twc.health/Grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. Dr. McCullough's involved with this company. So many other great doctors are. They're critical thinkers. They are not just going to regurgitate what the CDC and NIH says to you. This is why they've come up with this company, to help people who want to think for themselves as well. twc.health/Grant. I know all of you out there want to take the precautions necessary to protect your family, whether it's food, ammunition, water, power, whatever it may be. You make sure prescription medications are part of that plan. twc.health/Grant. Use the promo code GRANT on that. All right, Dr. McCullough. So this issue of podcasters that they came after. Let me pull this clip because I found this very interesting from Dr. Fauci, and this goes for all of us. So again, I'll ask you to listen and then get your response.
It's proven that. And do you also agree that it's saved hundreds of thousands and possibly millions of lives in America and across the world?
That is absolutely correct. And it's very clear that it's saved millions of lives here and throughout the world. The Europeans have done the same studies that we have, and the data are incontrovertible that they save lives.
Sir, and do you think the American public should listen to America's brightest and best doctors and scientists, or instead listen to podcasters, conspiracy theorists, and unhinged Facebook memes?
No, listening to people who you just described is going to do nothing but harm people because they will deprive themselves of life-saving interventions, which has happened. And you know, some have done studies. Peter Hotez has done an analysis of this and shows that in people who refuse to get vaccinated for any variety of reasons, probably responsible for an additional 200,000 to 300,000 deaths in this.
Dr. McCullough, I'll let you tackle that one.
The COVID vaccines didn't save a single life, Grant. There were no randomized trials ever that showed the vaccines reduce death. The consent form does not list mortality reduction as a benefit. So the consent form, the agencies know that they don't reduce death. There are no valid studies showing the vaccines reduce death. What he's pointing to are papers written by vaccinated doctors from institutions that mandated the vaccine that make the claim the vaccines reduce death. But in fact, what reduced death was early treatment. Vaccinated actually more likely to get early treatment. The virus mutating to be milder. As the vaccines rolled out, the virus did get milder. And then natural immunity. As the vaccines rolled out, more and more people already had the illness. So Fauci is fronting basically a giant scientific lie that the vaccines reduced death. And there that you can tell that the people in the room who took the vaccine, they want to believe this so badly, but it's not true.
You know, I'm always trying to be careful not to shame people who took the vaccine because there was so much pressure. You make decisions for yourself. And you know, they did, I'm sure, at the time what they thought was best. And now they have great regrets over it. Many of them do, at least. I try not to shame them. But you still have to be honest with people. You know, I think with him, he says there have been some studies. He doesn't name the study, as you mentioned. And that he says that we have incontrovertible evidence, which means there's no other dissent on this side. Now, wouldn't it have been easier if he says, you know what, there's two studies that say it didn't save lives, and I read two studies that did. I believe these studies instead of these, but we're still looking. Like, I would rather have a guy like this tell me the truth, that there are other studies out there that says that lives were not saved. Instead, he just lied and basically said there's no study that says this when we know there is.
Grant, if there was incontrovertible evidence that the vaccine saved lives, believe me, it would be in the consent form under benefits where it would say this vaccine is going to save your life. Believe me, in the consent form, they want to list every benefit. And it's not there because the agencies know it's not true. They know it's not true. The only thing they put in the consent form is that the vaccines historically reduce the risk of new infection with the first versions of the vaccine. The most recent versions of the vaccine used were only tested on animals. There's no way Fauci could know if they're going to save lives.
And that, again, always gets back to the beginning with me, is I didn't need to be a doctor to say you didn't have any tests. How do you know what it does? There's no tests. I mean, oh my gosh. So he mentioned a doctor named Hotze. Is that how you say his name? I've heard his name mentioned before. I think I've heard you mention his name. Who is this guy? What was he talking about there?
Well, we have to be careful. There's Peter Hotez at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. That's who Fauci is mentioning. And then there's also Dr. Stephen Hotze, who's down in Houston, who's been a big advocate of civil liberties and early treatment. So Peter Hotez is a vaccine developer at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. It turns out Hotez in 2015 and 2016 had research grants with Fauci's NIH division, NIAID, with Fudong University in China to develop COVID vaccines. So Hotez was in on this thing the entire time. CNN brought him on night after night. Hotez pretended like he was being surprised by COVID-19. He was just in the same camp as Fauci, deceiving America.
This seems to be the story over and over again. They got into the idea of deceiving America. Now, I will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I heard Dr. Fauci testify before Congress, I guess a couple years ago, there was no funding of gain-of-function research in China. I mean, he basically declared this, correct?
That's correct.
So then he says it as if it's been known all the time that we've been funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan. Listen to this exchange.
Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
I'm sorry, what was?
Did U.S. tax dollars flow through a grant recipient to the lab in China?
Yes, of course. It was a sub-award to the Wuhan Institute.
And who approved that award?
Excuse me?
And who approved that award? What agency approved that award?
National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Your agency approved that, right?
Yes, it did after.
Does that have anything to do with this downplaying of the lab leak theory?
No.
Nothing to do with it.
Nothing.
What?
Dr. McCullough. Yes, of course we did. Through the, I mean, I remember him saying, no, we did not fund it. And it took all kinds of independent journalists to figure out where the funding was coming from, proving it came through NIH.
On the published publications from the experiments done in that lab in 2015, they were done over many years. Nature Medicine 2016 and Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. In the papers, it says it's gain-of-function research. In the papers, it says the money comes from Fauci's unit at the NIH. And in the papers, they thank Peter Daszak, who was at the EcoHealth Alliance running the plans over to China, and they thank the Chinese for doing the work. So it is a U.S.-Chinese collaboration funded by U.S. dollars. It's gain-of-function research to make the virus that, in a sense, got the entire world sick. And Fauci continues to, you can see his posture, very defensive and deflective.
Yeah. So Jim Jordan made mention of this attempt to cover it up. You and I have talked about this. There were researchers that wrote a piece. Was it for Nature? They wrote the piece that says, hey, we believe it's a lab leak theory. Lo and behold, they put the screws to them. I'm probably oversimplifying this. They put the screws to the researchers to literally rewrite the article to say, no, we don't think it's the lab leak theory. And then they get a huge grant. And he downplays this and says, no, this had nothing to do with this. Do you believe him?
No, Fauci clearly was covering it up. It was Fauci, Francis Collins, Jeremy Farrar, who's now at the WHO, Christian Anderson at Scripps. He's the first author of this fraudulent proximal origins paper in Nature, Edwin Holmes at University of Sydney. This collaboration basically got together and said, you know what, let's write a series of fraudulent papers to deceive the world on the origins, take the heat off of Fauci and this Chinese collaboration. And Christian Anderson published this paper. It should be retracted because, you know, it all came out in the Fauci tapes and emails. They were conspiring to cover.
Yeah, they're conspiring to cover it up. And so this is why we need to keep doing these stories and never forget, because in the end, the joke was on all of us. And the joke, you know, got people sick, got people's businesses closed, got people you know, there was talk about the masks. Marjorie Taylor Greene talked about the masks and how there was no science behind it. He admitted in this testimony, finally, that there was no science behind 6 foot distancing and the masking of children.
You know, we had the Cochrane analysis that came out, Grant, you know, over 80 studies. Public masking doesn't work. You know, all this effort on masking, social distancing, it was all in the context of you could avoid getting COVID. That was completely incorrect. We all got it. The entire country got it. Every single person who wore a mask was wasting their time because we were all going to get it. The only thing that prevented getting the infection was natural immunity. And then we have some pretty good studies with nasal sprays and gargles, particularly xylitol, randomized trials. That was about the only thing that prevented one from getting it. Vaccines didn't work, neither did masks or contagion control measures.
All right, I've got 2 more to go through. If you got time for me, I'd like to go through 2 of these just because I think it's so important to get the other side of this. James Comer approached him on basically the changing of studies using personal emails. Remember, Dr. Fauci's top aide was in front of Congress, I guess it was last week or the week before, and basically admitted he was using his personal emails and talk about arrogance. This was another guy who was totally arrogant during all of this. Let me play this exchange between Comer and Fauci.
So there's a troubling pattern of behavior from your inner circle, not just Dr. Moran's, but also your chief of staff, Mr. Folkers. Do you agree that it violates NAID policy to use personal email for official purposes?
The Dr. Moran's issue that was discussed by this committee violates NIH policy, yes.
But does using official email, using a personal email for official business, does that violate policy?
Using a personal email for official business violates NIH policy.
Does it violate NIAID policy to delete records to intentionally avoid FOIA?
Yes.
Okay. On April 28, 2020, Dr. Moran's edited an EcoHealth press release regarding the grant termination. Does that violate policy?
That was inappropriate for him to be doing that for a grantee as a conflict of interest, among other things.
So on March 29, 2021, Dr. Moran's edited a letter that Dr. Daszak was sending to NIH. Does that violate policy?
Yes, it does.
On October 25th, 2021, Dr. Moran's provided Dr. Daszak with advice regarding how to mislead NIH on EcoHealth's late progress report. Does that violate policy?
That was wrong and inappropriate and violated policy.
The question becomes, were these directions coming from Dr. Fauci? You know, Dr. Moran's, when he testified, Dr. McCullough, he was talking about all these back channels to Fauci. There was a committee that if you wanted to talk to Fauci, you had to go in front of this committee and then they would decide whether they sent it, and you had to do it in person. All of that is trying to get around. This is how the mafia operates, by the way. Mafia in New York, you don't call them on the phone. You go through the little captains, the capos on the street, and then you meet them at the Ravenite nightclub, and you hope there's not a wire there. But this is exactly how Dr. Fauci was operating.
True. Fauci has no problem throwing his assistant, David Morans, under the bus. I think that's important to see. Morans said that they took conversations offline. They used personal emails. They typed in cipher code. They actually used different characters in words in order to throw off the FOIA requests regarding search terms. It was very intentional. Another part of the testimony I noticed, someone asked Fauci, did you use personal email with David Morans? Did you do this and write in cipher to conduct official business? And then Fauci looks at the camera and goes, not official business. So what he was essentially saying is, yes, I did, for unofficial business, which was the entire cover-up.
That's right.
So, Fauci is actually listening to the words very carefully, and, he's getting not very skilled questions. And, a better question would have been, did you use personal email and type in cipher regarding any aspects, official or unofficial, of the response? And then he would have to say yes. So you can tell Fauci is clearly navigating. He's getting these questions. He's able to handle them.
Yeah, he sure is. Last one I'm going to play for you is just Dr. Fauci talking about, oh, woe is me, and all of the things that he has to go through because of us evil conservatives. This is who he lays it on. I'm going to play it for you, and then I want to get your response from a personal level to see if there's any similarities to what's happening here. Take a listen.
There have been everything from harassments by emails, texts, letters of myself, my wife, my 3 daughters. There have been credible death threats leading to the arrests of 2 individuals, and credible death threats means someone who clearly was on their way to kill me. And it's required my having protective services essentially all the time. It is very troublesome to me. It is much more troublesome because they've involved my wife and my 3 daughters.
At these moments, how do you feel? Keep your mic on.
Terrible.
Do you continue to receive threats today?
Yes, I do. Every time someone gets up and says I'm responsible for the death of people throughout the world, the death threats go up.
All right, couple questions for you, Dr. McCullough. Do you think Dr. Fauci is responsible for deaths around the world?
He is through two means. One is through therapeutic nihilism. He never encouraged doctors like me to do everything we can to treat patients. In fact, he impeded my ability to treat patients consistently, drug after drug after drug, strategy after strategy. And then also he did promote and then force these vaccines on the world. And they took people's lives, over 4,000 peer-reviewed papers of fatal and non-fatal vaccine catastrophes. He did that. And so he is getting threats. But let me tell you what, he didn't lose any jobs. His net worth has skyrocketed. People like me, lost multiple jobs. We've really taken a hit. His wife is an NIH ethicist. So she's in on this as well. She's not an innocent person on the sideline. Ethics by the NIH. Where was the NIH when we had all kinds of ethical violations through the pandemic? Where was the Office of Human Resource Protections? They were gone. Where was the American Civil Liberties Union grant? Everybody just, any protection of civil liberties was gone during the pandemic, and Fauci was at the top making this call.
Well, people like you stood up, and I will say this. He talked about death threats, and I don't want anyone to offer Dr. Fauci death threats. I don't condone that in any way, shape, or form, but it goes both ways as well. When I was at the NRA, I can't tell you how many death threats I get. I still get them every now and then now, not as much. My son, Dr. McCullough, I don't know if I ever told you this, was going to local elementary school. He got a death threat that went to the NRA. They were going to kill him at school, and we had FBI agents. God bless them, thankfully. They went to a home in Florida and tracked down the person making those threats against my son in school, that they were going to kill him in school. This is when I worked at the NRA. The threats I would get about what they would do with shotguns and where they would put them on. It's a way of life. It's part of the business. Did I ever believe it was really going to happen? No. Did I take precautions? Absolutely. I'll ask you this. And do you get death threats? Do you get harassing emails?
Grant, it's been the oddest thing. I've never had anybody even challenge me by text or by email.
Wow.
I honestly, I'd love to get an email from someone who says, I really disagree with you, and here's the reasons why. I really don't get them. There's some people who appear to be just anonymous nut jobs on Twitter every so often. But Grant, you know what? The truth is powerful. And I think people really, really want to stay away from someone who's holding power and holding truth.
Well, I say this as a guy who's gotten to know you. You have a very comfortable way about you. You do not have an arrogance about you that Dr. Fauci most certainly has. And when you bring the studies like you do, and you talk in a way, you're very, very believable. I think people have an ultimate trust in you because you've upheld that trust. I mean, everything you have said since the beginning of all of this, since I've known you, has all been true. No one has been able to disprove it. Am I correct on that?
It's true, Grant. Listen, if I was wrong on a major issue or I changed my views, I would simply tell the nation. It happened when I went on Joe Rogan. I told Joe Rogan that we're not getting the virus 2 and 3 times, which is true early on. And then when Omicron broke through natural immunity, it was obvious you could get it. I was on national TV literally that night and told America, listen, the virus mutated. Now you can get it multiple times. So we all have to be able to change our views. But we should hold strong to the truth and cite the information, be as factual and dispassionate as possible. There really is no place for death threats and violence, Grant. No. And I understand Fauci. There are books written about him, books with his face on the cover saying he should be in jail. He should feel uncomfortable about it. He did enough for people to write books like Robert F. Kennedy and Peter Bregan and Rand Paul. I mean, come on.
And he gets protective services. We don't get protective services, and they're the ones who want to take away our guns as well, which goes into a whole nother argument. But you got me beat, Dr. McCullough. I would say if that's the one time they got you, so you're right 99% of the time. I always tell people who watch the Stinchfield's Army knows, I always tell them I'm right 95% of the time. 5% I get it wrong, but I admit it when I get it wrong the next day. Dr. Peter McCullough, I really think this is very helpful. This was a great exercise, and it's an honor to be able to do it with you. I'm grateful for you and the wellness company. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great having you on. And folks, let me just give all of you a reminder again about the wellness company and just how important this organization is to keep you and your family safe. I believe there's 4 separate emergency medical kits now that you can get, all for different types of emergencies. But really, I'm going to just tell you this. Get the first one. Go to my page, twc.health/grant, twc.health/grant. Let me get the right one up there. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. If you go to that address, the first kit, then start to add on to them. Okay. And I want you to do this. I want you to do it today because it really is about keeping your family safe. Ivermectin in this kit, a lot of states and cities, towns, sometimes it's still hard to get. I can't believe it is. It shouldn't be because this is really turning out to be quite a miracle drug. But that's in the kit, and then all kinds of life-saving prescription medications, antivirals, antiparasitics, and all kinds of stuff that you need to keep your family safe. twc.health/grant. Don't forget my website, folks, grantstinchfield.com, Stinchfield1776 on all the social media platforms. And we will see you on the Real America's Voice show tonight. It's been a great pleasure having you on Stinchfield's Army Rolls. Thanks, folks. See you soon.